This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Baglin.
If you wash your car, that means rain soon. What other telltale signs do you use to forecast weather? My guest today has made a career out of forecasting Kentucky's weather, and while he has all the new tools like Doppler radar, computer modeling at his disposal, he doesn't overlook the simple signs told to us by nature. Woolly worms, the color of the sky at dawn. Louisville TV meteorologist John Belski talks backyard weather folklore. Next on Kentucky Afield Radio.
I have never seen anything like this.
I can't believe I waited so long.
What will you say?
My heart was pounding.
This is Kentucky. It's deer season, and it's outstanding. 146 record-book deer in the past 3 years. Modern gun season, November 8th through 23rd. With archery season open now. What do you say?
Yeah.
I can't believe I made the shot.
Get your license and deer permit now, and take aim on the thrill at fw.ky.gov.
Deer in the headlights. Watch out, Mr. Deer.
Singing with your kids in the car is one way to keep deer hazard season in mind. And should a deer catch your headlights, flash those lights, sound your horn, break its concentration to scurry it along.
There's one.
And where there's one, there may be 2 or 3 more. Deer hazard season runs through November, so be wise behind the wheel while nature runs its course. A message from Fish and Wildlife and the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety. This is Charlie Baglin here on Kentucky Afield Radio. Somewhere we all have favorite memories of a backyard. My guest certainly does. He's currently seen on WLKY, that's TV 32, in Louisville. Meteorologist there with the weather team. But years before that, he did the 6 and 11 on Wave TV 3, the NBC affiliate there. What he didn't do was do the weather in the studio, but instead outside in the cold and the wind and the rain under an umbrella and a little spot called Belski's Backyard, right there off the back parking lot of the TV station on Floyd Street. He had a flair on occasion for using weather signs found in nature, wildlife, and folklore, because know it or not, there's some real validity to some of this. John Belski, welcome.
How you doing today?
I'm doing well. I have followed your career for a number of years. I remember you out of the Louisville, Kentucky market.
Right.
Started at Channel 32. I watched you for many years on Channel 3 and then back at 32. So welcome back to 32.
It's a full circle there.
Where else have you been? Anywhere else in the state, around the nation?
I got my start out in Columbia, Missouri, and then worked in St. Louis for a short while. But again, that was many years ago, and have been here in Kentucky ever since.
I was talking to the National Weather Service Forecasting Office, and they recommended I talk to you because you have this, if I can say, a Dick Freimeyer type of sense about you, that you know a lot about nature and weather forecasting.
Well, yeah, studied the weather signs for many years, and would do a presentation on folklore. In fact, John Gordon with the Weather Service, I think, was at one of my presentations one time, and he was mesmerized by it. He says, "Wow, I didn't know, there were so many different weather sayings there." And for years, people said you need to write a book. So a few years ago, I wrote a book, and then I updated again about 2 or 3 years ago, and it's got over 1,600 ways to predict weather. Not that they're all accurate. There's some of them are accurate, and a lot of them are just kind of a fun deal. But it's kind of neat to pull it out every now and then. If I see something out in my backyard here at home, or if I'm out hiking, it's like, what does that mean? And sometimes it's in the book, and we'll see if that prediction works out correctly. But it's kind of back to the pioneer days. Everything is so high tech now. In fact, I laugh at the TV station. I said it's like we almost have too much information coming in. It's almost overwhelming, and sometimes it's nice just to get back to the basics there and to see what the signs that Mother Nature is giving us to predict weather.
They do help. I understand you wrote the book for charity.
That's correct. My wife and I worked on this, and we decided that once the printing costs were covered, all the money would go to local charities, and we were able to donate, quite a bit of money because of that.
What is the name of the book?
The book is called Backyard Weather Folklore, and it's no longer in print, Charlie. Every Christmas I get all sorts of emails and calls from people, this is a great Christmas gift, but maybe I'll get going, get out of a lazy streak here and put the book back into print, but for now you can still find it. I've seen some copies at some of these flea markets and stuff like that that people are selling, so you can still find it around here and there, but there's a number of thousand that are out there, and I know we shipped them when we were selling it. We shipped them to almost every state in the country.
We don't have near enough time to talk about all 1,600 ways you can use nature to talk about.
It'd have to be a pretty long show there.
It would be. But I would like to start out simply by asking, I know we're going to talk about some weather terms today, such as clouds and barometric pressure and high pressure, low pressure. Mm-hmm. We've heard these terms all our lives, viewers like me, not really knowing what they are. What are some of the key terms you'll be talking about in this?
Key thing, and first, keeping it simple here, is in general terms, high pressure is fair weather, and the low pressure is stormy weather, or rain, snow, thunderstorms, whatever. Obviously, cold front means it's going to be getting colder with the front. Warm front, it's going to be getting warmer. Those are your basics. But when it comes to these weather folklore sayings, the key things for the ones, the plants and animals especially, are in tune with. Some of them have to do with the barometric pressure, a rising pressure, a falling pressure. Some of them have to do with the amount of moisture in the air or the change in the amount of moisture in the air, and a few of them have to do with wind also. And those are your key components as far as the weather signs, what is influencing the weather signs. And with that, we talk about, every year I do a thing predicting the winter weather, with the weather signs. And it actually starts during July and goes through early December. The various signs come out at different times. And I always say the long range is a fun thing. It's a flip of the coin. There's really no scientific basis for that. But with that said, in the last 10 years, Charlie, weather signs have been correct on the winter prediction 7 of the 10 years.
Really?
Missed 3 of the years. Last year was an overwhelmingly cold, snowy winter forecast from the weather signs. I looked at about 55 different signs, and about almost 40 of them, I believe, said it was going to be a cold and snowy or cold or snowy, and only about 8 to 10 signs said it was going to be a mild winter, and the rest said it was going to be near normal. But whereas the official forecast, from NOAA, the official government forecast had only 5% of the country below normal temperatures last year. That was supposed to be in Montana, and about 75% ended up being colder than normal.
It was it was a doozy. We've had a lot more snowfall, but last winter was a cold one.
Now, it's funny though you mentioned that, because I heard much fewer complaints about hot weather this summer, because people said, I promised I wasn't going to play out the heat, if and when it comes back. And, it's second nature. Oh, it's so hot out. But, people were catching themselves saying, I remember last winter, so when it's 95 degrees, I'm not going to complain about it.
I don't think there's a car owner out there that wouldn't agree with this statement. If you want it to rain, all you have to do is wash your car. I got out on the web and I did some digging around. And I found some ways that we use nature to help us forecast the weather. And I'm going to bet that all these wound up in your book along the way. But so I'm not really sure where to start. So I'm going to start here. Red sky at night, sailors delight. Red sky at morning, sailors take warning. Any validity to that?
Yeah, 2 types of red sky, though, with that. Red sky at night with the sunset is the sun. That has to come with the sun shining through a haze layer, where there's the winds are fairly light at the surface and aloft, and you get your summertime haze, so the sun will set red, and you'll actually have kind of a red sky at sunset there, and that's a sign that the weather is fairly tranquil and will stay that way. However, there's the red sky in the morning comes from the fact that you have high, thin cirrus clouds coming in to your area in advance of a storm system. Those will give that reddish tint to the sky. The sky actually turns right at sunrise with some of these high, thin cirrus clouds. And again, that's a sign that, morning sailors take warning. So it can be a little confusing. Sometimes you can get that red sky in the morning, with just the haze and no clouds or anything like that. But this all came over. These signs came before we, had the polluted days of the 1900s into the current day. These are from the sailors back in the 1800s in the middle of the ocean, and they were going more by, the cloud type of deal.
They saw day after day and night after night that, yes, this works.
Oh, yeah, more often than not.
Backyard Wildlife Folklore. John Belski is our guest. I'm Charlie Baglin. Forecast is partly cloudy with a chance that you will want to stick around for more. After the break, here on Kentucky Afield Radio. You are listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin. We're talking about backyard weather folklore today. Our guest is John Belski, who has written the book of that very name. Can still find it here and there. Now, here's one question, John. Is weather in Kentucky that hard to predict?
Yeah, let's go on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 is the easiest place in the country, and 10 is the hardest. I would put Kentucky at about a 7. And the reason for that is we're halfway between Canada and the Gulf of Mexico. So, what's going to happen? Is the cold air going to win out, or is the warmer air going to win out? Because we're seeing these winter storms. They shift at the last second, and instead of getting 4 inches of snow, we get all rain or something like that. And also, the Ohio Valley is in that area where these low pressure systems, these storm systems, come out of the plain states, and as they're heading toward the Great Lakes or heading toward the East Coast or whatever. We have to. Sometimes they peak before they get here, and then they start weakening. Other times they're strengthening as they move through. Sometimes it's hard to figure out. Sometimes, hey, has this snowstorm or is this rain system, has this seen its most powerful moment? It's weakening now, or is this getting stronger? Do we need to really watch this more carefully? Each weather system's a little bit different as it comes through, and the main thing you can do is to look back on past experiences on this type of situation. I mean, you hear the term computer models, and when the people watch the TV, they see what's the future cast, the future radar, whatever. It's all the same thing. It's all a computer model. Every TV station in Kentucky, whether you're in Paducah, Louisville, Lexington, whatever, Bowling Green, everyone's got the same type of deal, which they all show on the air. Let's say, it says that over your county it's going to rain at 10 o'clock that night. Does that mean it's going to happen that way? No, it's sometimes yes, sometimes no. It's more of a general thing saying, yeah, there's going to be some rain, in the vicinity maybe, but, 3 hours later, you get a new computer model update, and it may shift it by 100 miles. So
maybe you can identify a source. I have heard, maybe you talk to people who are more learned in weather than I do on a daily basis. But people will say, they say it's going to be a horrible winter, or they say it's going to be a harsh summer. And I don't know where they're getting their information. All I know about what they're saying is that they say, and I don't know who they
are. Who is this they?
I have no clue. I try to be as socially literate as I possibly can and keep myself up to speed on what's. I never hear them say this or whoever they are. I've never heard it said.
Well, okay. Well, your official source is the National Weather Service, or which comes under the NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. But part of that is the National Weather Service. So that's your official government. Then then there's like the Climate Prediction Center. Every month they update the monthly forecast and the seasonal forecast, for the next year and things like that. But there are also several private companies that issue these same types of forecasts. The biggest one is AccuWeather, which does a lot of media and also a lot of business, weather forecasting for businesses. That's a they there. Another one is it's called WSI, Weather Services International, and they are owned by the same group that owns the Weather Channel. So that's another they there. And then another up-and-coming one is called Weather Bell. gentleman who used to be one of the meteorologists with AccuWeather, quit AccuWeather, and he and one of the founders of the Weather Channel linked up and formed this company about 4 or 5 years ago, and they have turned out to be actually the most accurate long-range predicting source out there for winter and summer forecasts and for hurricanes. So those are where some of your theys are coming from, I would assume. People are hearing it, hearing forecasts, from whether it's the government or one of these private companies.
Okay.
Unless it's just, Farmer Joe down the street says, well, my corns are aching, and that means it's going to be a bad winter, and maybe he's a they then. So.
Well, that you may have a very good point there. The Farmer's Almanac says, and that is the truth of light and away.
Well, I didn't mean to omit them. I'm glad you brought them up because the almanacs, and there's two main almanacs. You have the Old Farmer's Almanac and you have the Farmer's Almanac. And, and on the day-to-day thing where they say, from the 4th to the 7th, partly sunny and cold, well, to me that's kind of a guessing thing. I don't go by that. But I do like to pay attention to their seasonal forecast because they hit the forecast more often than they miss it. Let's go back to last winter. The Farmer's Almanac hit really hard on the cold and the snow for a good chunk of the country. They got it. They were very close. The Old Farmer's Almanac was, had a decent forecast, but they weren't as good as the They weren't as good as the Farmer's Almanac. So then let's go to this year. The Farmer's Almanac, they're calling for. How do they word it here? Chivalry and chivalry. That's shivering and chivalry or something like that. But they're saying, again, another extreme winter of cold and snow, especially in areas east of the Rockies. And, again, the Old Farmer's Almanac didn't hit it quite as hard, but even the Old Farmer's Almanac for Kentucky is saying that December and January are going to be very cold, and then they'll be milder during February, and they are predicting a dry winter. But if you have a cold winter, just because precipitation would be below normal does not mean it won't be a snowy winter because. Let's say all your precipitation in January fell as snow. Well, let's say your average January precip in this part of the country is about 3 to 4 inches. And if it's all rain, it's 3 to 4 inches. Okay, well, let's say we only got 1 inch. But that all fell as snow. That would be 10 inches of snow. So that would be a snowy January.
Yeah.
But yet it would be a very dry January because it was only about 1/3 or 1/4 what your normal amount of precip is. So what I'm saying is basically the almanacs are both almanacs are saying a cold and probably snowy winter ahead for us again.
Using nature to help us predict the weather. You look up at the sky at night, you'll see the moon, there's a ring around it. Does that halo indicate anything?
Yeah, that's a very famous one, and that has to do with, and the moon has to be near full, by the way, for this effect. So you're not going to be able to see this every night of the year, only at certain times of the year when you're within a couple of days of a full moon. But the moonlight is shining through thin cirrus clouds made of ice crystals, and the moonlight refracts through these clouds and forms this halo. And the general rule of thumb is when you see this, if the winds are out of the northeast, east, southeast, or south, in that direction there, that means rain or snow within 24 hours. If the winds are out of another direction, southwest, west, northwest, north, it just means a change in the weather coming. Because, again, these clouds are usually, not always, but usually in advance of a low-pressure system. And the wind direction depends on whether this low is passing to your north or coming in right in your area or whatever. And that's why, you look at the halo and then you go check to see what direction the winds are. And, then you can come up with your rain or snow forecast from that.
Clouds are a very good indication of what the weather's going to do or might do. And there are several types out there. You could do a whole show or maybe teach a whole class on clouds. Let's say if it's just a full cloudy day, or if you can see the blue sky behind the clouds, and some of them are high, thin, and just little wispy things, and other ones are huge, towering clouds. Do they tell a story just in themselves?
Towering clouds, foretell thunderstorms, forming there. So here's what they're saying. When clouds appear like rock towers, the earth will be washed by frequent showers. So, clouds where you can see building height with them is a sign of, showers forming or even possibly, some thunderstorms. And then the cirrus clouds, which is the real high clouds, trace in the sky, the painter's brush, where you see those wispy clouds up high. The winds around you soon will rush. So, again, that's another sign the cirrus clouds in advance of a storm system. And as the storm system gets closer, the winds are going to increase. So that's the nice thing about these weather signs is you never know where your next forecast is going to be coming from.
Campfire smoke. There was one I found on the web about this. Campfire smoke, if it hangs low to the ground and drifts off into surrounding tree branches, then rain is possible. Otherwise, if your campfire smoke rises in a straight...
It means fair weather, yeah. And same thing with barbecue smoke. So for people who aren't camping out, if you're just grilling out some burgers or steaks out in the backyard, and this is a famous one for me because the first time I ever gave this weather saying on TV many years ago, my wife happened to be barbecuing at that time, and she looked up, and the smoke was coming back down to the ground, and she said it poured like within 20 or 30 minutes. But that has to do with the instability of the air and also the moisture content, as the moisture can kind of hold that smoke down to the ground, too, as you get an increasing moisture before it rains, but more the instability of the air. So, fair weather, smoke will rise. And this works to a certain extent even with smokestacks with industries. But again, more so for the campfires and the barbecue grills. Smoke up, comes back down, chance for rain. Smoke straight up, no rain, fair weather.
I will check that out next time I'm grilling, and I will impress the socks off my wife.
There you go.
Guaranteed.
There you go.
Music is playing, John. Our weekly fishing report is just ahead. And if you want to impress your friends on how much you know about meteorology, you'll need to stay around for the next half hour. John Belski is the guest, Backyard Weather Folklore. My name is Charlie Baglin, and you are listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. Bagman back on Kentucky Afield Radio. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to hear the show again, or if you'd like to maybe dig up an old show, there's some easy ways to do that. Go to myhuntingandfishing.com. You can also find us on iTunes. Just put Kentucky Afield Radio in the search box. And also on YouTube.com. Find it all. Share the link on Facebook. More about Backyard Weather Folklore in this half hour. First up, our fishing report.
This is Tom with your fishing report from the Northeast. With water temperatures continuing to drop in the area, sauger fishing should be picking up. At last report, the bigger fish still had not moved up, but the anglers were having some luck catching some slightly smaller ones off the walls on the Ohio side of the river behind the Green Up Lock Dam. Fillet baits, jigs, and twister tails are all good options up here this time of the year. Crappie anglers in the upper portions of both Cave Run and Grayson Lake catching some fish around 10 inches and 7 to 20 feet of water on jigs and minnows. The tailwaters of Cave Run Lake has a lot of different things going on right now. Trout were stocked last week, so you'll have a pretty good shot with those. And the muskie fishing has also picked up in the last couple of weeks. November has been a big month for trout stocking so far. In addition to the tailwaters at Cave Run, the Grayson tailwaters were also stocked. The trout streams in Elliott County, Big Caney, and Laurel were also stocked. That should do it for us in the Northeast. Wherever you go, good luck and stay safe.
This is Kevin Fry with your Eastern Area Fisheries Report. Tailwaters at Buckhorn, Carr, Dewey, Paintsville, Yatesville, and Fish Trap were stocked with trout on November 20th and 21st. Also, several area lakes, including Pan Bowl, Kingdom Come, Fish Pond, and Milo and Martin County Reservoir were stocked with trout on the same days. Some anglers catching some muskie from the Buckhorn Lake tailwater. A few anglers, braving the cold of recent, were catching crappie in shallow turbid water in upper lake areas. These crappie anglers were also catching some white bass in these areas at Dewey and Fish Trap Lakes. Various lures mimicking shad, including crankbaits and spoons, were getting hits from the hybrid striped bass.
Hi, this is Eric Cummins with your Southwest Kentucky Fishing Report. As the creeks are running much colder than the main lake temperatures, great opportunities exist below our area tailwaters for a mixed bag. Barren River tailwater for hybrids, crappie, and the occasional walleye or sauger. Green River tailwater for crappie, muskie, and walleye. NOLA and tailwater for white bass, crappie, walleye, and rainbow trout. And of course, don't overlook the Cumberland tailwater for trout, stripers, and walleye action. Good smallwater bass fishing day trip for this time of year would be hitting Mill Creek Lake near Tompkinsville and Metcalfe County Lake near Edmonton. These lakes are only 30 minutes apart, offering you a chance to regroup and warm up if need be. As always, good luck and good fishing. Make sure your life jacket's got your back.
You are listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. Roses are red, violets are blue, and both smell much better in a rainstorm. It's true. We'll tell you why after the break.
Boys were in trouble. About 10 seconds later, he said boys were going down.
A true story.
And it sunk right out from under us.
20 degrees.
Within seconds, one boating trip went
straight down.
The water was bone-chilling.
Once you hit that water, it's so cold you can't move.
The human body wasn't designed for this.
It took my breath away as soon as I hit it, and my hands were so cold in a matter of seconds that I couldn't pop the clip on my waders to get them off.
Conditions were so bad, it's amazing that anybody survived.
Perfect for duck hunting, but not for a swim in the middle of a river.
Going overboard is never the thought.
You have to think ahead.
Fun can turn frantic in seconds.
There's no time to react when your world just sinks out from under you.
3 hunters, 2 survivors, 1 reason.
Your life jacket's got your back.
Make sure your first mate isn't your last.
I really don't think that I could have made it without a life jacket.
Your Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife reminds you, your life jacket's got your back, and the backing of sportsmen on winter water everywhere. You are listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin. My home for the rest of the hour, John Belski, who is a fixture in Louisville weather media, has been since the 80s. He's with us on the phone. We're talking about weather as it is applicable statewide. Weather's interplay with nature. Some is folklore, some is science fact. Flowers, John. We smell flowers much more intensely before a rain.
Yeah, there's certain types of flowers especially that certainly will give off a much stronger aroma before it rains. And part of that is because as a thunderstorm approaches or as a general rain system approaches, your barometric pressure is falling. And when there's a lower pressure, air can rise more. So when there's lower pressure, the smell around flowers themselves will actually lift up and be more apparent right before it rains. This is no folklore about it. This is scientific fact. That because of the lower pressure, the smell is rising, and you can smell flowers more right before it rains.
If you can smell the earth or smell the plant life, then you're looking at some rain soon. And
here's another example of a low pressure, and this happens in ponds or in slow-moving streams, creeks. The lower pressure will release these microorganisms from the bottom of the creek, and they'll float up to the creek or the pond surface. Usually the fish, might be feeding, down in the bottom, these microorganisms. Well, if they all, with the low pressure, if they all rise up to the surface, or some of them rise to the surface, the fish will be feeding at the surface, and you'll notice fish will actually be jumping out of the water more before it storms.
I grew up in a small town in northern Kentucky. It's called Carrollton. That's part of your forecast area. Mm-hmm. And we lived in town, and in the back, out beyond the backyard was an alley. And we had telephone poles with wires going up and down the alley. And I would notice, or my mother would point this out to me, you see all those birds out there on that wire? That means it's going to rain. The low pressure that's associated with rain, what makes it hard for them to fly or hard to hear? It troubles the birds. What is it? Yeah, exactly. It's more difficult for them to fly, and birds will fly much lower before it rains because of the low pressure. When you see birds flying up high, that means it's not going to rain. But if you see them kind of hanging down toward the ground. A couple other signs of the birds there, Charlie. Birds, especially robins, when they'll go up on the branches of a tree, if there's rain coming in, they'll actually roost a little more closer to the trunk of the tree. Sometimes you'll see them sitting out of the edge of the branch. Mm-hmm. When there's rain coming in, they'll actually go toward the trunk. Also, robins will come a lot closer to your house, to get the worms before it rains. They know that. My theory has always been, they can sense the rain coming, so they're trying to take more chances to get food than they usually would before it rains. So they'll come closer to the house to get their food.
Same thing you'll notice, like rabbits. Rabbits before general rain or before a snowstorm, you'll notice them a lot in the wintertime, a lot more out in the open, looking for food. They're a lot more anxious. And birds at the bird feeder before a snowstorm in the wintertime can sense it coming, and they are much busier around the bird feeders right before a snowstorm hits.
Squirrels and acorns, I guess, the same way.
Some people say that the thing with the acorns, with the oak trees, it has to do with the pollination period in the spring, and I guess that's more the scientific fact there. If it's been a good pollinating year and a good summer, there's going to be a lot of acorns. Yeah, getting back to the squirrels, though, if you'll notice the squirrels, going after food more than usual in the fall, they'll store up food. In fact, I don't know if you get a chance to see something like this, but sometimes you'll notice squirrels will actually be burying some of the walnuts and other types of nuts, that they're acorns and things like that. They're actually burying them in the ground. That's a sign of a very severe winter coming up when they do that. Also, if you notice squirrels like eating bark on a tree during the fall, that's another sign that the winter is going to be rough there. Again, the long-range ones, more of a fun thing, not much scientific fact, but it's kind of fun to keep track of these signs. And the bushier the squirrel's tail is supposedly supposed to mean the colder the winter is going to be.
What about woolly worms? There
are several sayings with woolly worms, and the most famous weather saying is with and this is the official one, where it's black on both ends and you have that brown band in the middle. And the wider the brown band, the milder the winter is supposed to be. The narrower the band is, then the colder the winter is supposed to be. However, there are several other weather sayings with the woolly worms, and one of them this year already is foretelling a cold winter, is that when the woolly worms are out early in the season, and we actually had some spotted as early as July, which I've never seen before. People were saying, what's the deal with all the woolly worms out in July? And we've never had this happen. When they're early in the season, that means it's going to be a bad winter. Also, if you get a large number of woolly worms in the fall, it's going to be a cold and snowy winter. The prime season for seeing these woolly worms, where they're crossing the streets on a warm day, you can see them on the blacktop pavement there. Like the last week of September and the first week or two of October is what I call peak season. If you still see woolly worms out in November, that's also a sign of a bad winter coming up. And then back to the brown bands, and I've seen this before too. In fact, I saw this last winter on several of them. If you see a woolly worm with two brown bands, because most of them usually just have the one, if they have two brown bands, that's going to be a rough winter.
And you have seen evidence of this so far this year?
No, I've not seen that. I saw that last year. I've not seen anything like that this year yet, but I saw three or four last year, whereas most years go by where you don't even see that. So also the white woolly worms, if you see those, and not just one, but if you see, they're fairly rare to see white, but if you start seeing them around here and there more than usual, that's a sign of a snowy winter. And then the black woolly worms, the ones that are all black, if they're especially furry or fuzzy, however you describe them there, that's a sign of a cold winter.
I know television stations sometimes will trademark their own name for their weather forecast or maybe their radar system, but it seems to me that with all of the technology there is today to help folks like you forecast the weather, that maybe, like you were saying at the first part of the show, if you took that with a grain of salt, but also took a look at Mother Nature and what she is telling us, you may just get it right a little more often. The computer model is saying this, the woolly worms are saying that. I bet you it's going to happen.
Well, here's how I look at it. Again, and again, on a winter forecast, and I will do these folklore forecasts, and I'll say that. Now, that's not my official winter forecast. This is what the weather signs are saying. But there are some short-range ones that you can count on to be accurate. Let me pass along a couple here. Probably the most accurate weather sign is with the spiders. This is the best during the summertime, and use an outdoor spider, like out in the garden or by the house or whatever. Usually in the evening, about 7, 8, 9 o'clock, they'll repair their web. They'll fix up any damage that was done during the daytime. And if they do that, it's not going to rain that night or the next day. But if they leave the web to move on to new territory, here comes some rain. And again, this is right almost all the time. I remember one time we were in a drought at our house. I started following this spider, and he was there every night fixing up his web. And this went on. It didn't rain for another couple of weeks. So we'd gone like 3 weeks without a drop of rain. And finally one night he was gone, and sure enough, the next day we had a thunderstorm. And I'm not basing that weather sign on that experience because I'd followed this many times before then. But the spiders are very accurate. Also, in the summertime, dogs are accurate for telling if it's going to storm. They have a very keen sense of hearing. Most dogs, not all dogs, but most dogs do not like the sound of thunder. They get very agitated, and sometimes the thunder is bad enough where we still haven't heard it yet, but they can sense that coming. They hear the thunder, and they have a very sensitive digestive system, and slight variations in air pressure can affect how their tummy feels. So as the pressure drops with the thunderstorm approaching and the hearing the thunder, it upsets their tummy. And what's a dog do when it has an upset stomach? It eats grass. So if you notice all the neighborhood dogs eating grass on a summer afternoon, that's a sign there's probably going to be some thunderstorms within the next hour or two move into your area.
I'll have to watch that.
That's your real dog days of summer there, is the dogs predicting. Now, cats, there's nothing really nearly as accurate as the dogs there. But another one is dandelions. Dandelions will close up about a half hour before it rains to protect the pollen. And in fact, a lot of flowers do that. Mums, this time of year, everyone's selling mums. And the daytime, the blooms on the mums will close up about a half hour to an hour before it rains. Same thing, they're protecting that pollen from getting wet, trying to keep it from getting wet.
And you can depend on that, it sounds like 100% of the time.
Close to it. Nothing is ever 100%, but pretty close to it. Bees, if you have flowers at your house, and notice how the bees are usually pretty busy, usually about 30 minutes before it rains. And sometimes they cut it a little closer, but they will abandon their pollination efforts, and they'll leave the flowers and head back to their hive to make sure they're in cover. Ants. Here's another one, good one. And ants, if you're having a picnic and the ants are, trying to eat your food and bothering you, that's okay. Means no rain. But if they're ignoring you and you see them marching right by in a straight line, they're heading back, to the anthill to get underground and get back to safety before it rains.
I'm glad I called you because I'm going to know so much next time I go on a picnic.
I'm not trying to put the Weather Channel out of business or anything like that, but there are other ways to get your weather.
This is the sign of weather that most of the time people don't hear, but yet it's worth listening to. It's worth considering.
Well, most people enjoy this, and I laugh because every now and then, over the years, I would get on and say, hey, let's change gears here on a slow weather day. Let me tell you how to predict weather, this or that. And, the hardcore meteorologists just hated that. There's nothing to that. And I says, what are you talking about? For years, people would say, oh, my knee, my arthritis is acting up, or my knee pain is worse. I can tell it's going to rain. And for years, doctors said there's nothing to it. Now they all say, yeah, it's the lower pressure, and it causes, those joints to get inflamed and cause the pain. But for many years, doctors, said, you're nuts. And just in the last 20, 30 years, doctors finally said, yeah, there's something to this pressure thing, and people, having more pain. So
my grandmother had rheumatism and arthritis, and she'd always say things like that. And here all the while, I thought she had ESP. Back with our final few with our guest, John Belski. You were listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. Listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Beglin. We're back with our final few with the legendary television meteorologist out of Louisville, John Belski, and we're talking about ways that nature can help us predict the weather. And John, here is one that is right most of the time, or if not all of the time, within a very small margin of error, and it's crickets chirping.
Oh, yeah. You count the number of cricket chirps in 15 seconds, add 37, and that'll give you your current temperature. Because crickets the warmer it is, the faster they'll chirp. And then the slower it is, the colder it is, they'll chirp slower. Now, in fact, I gave that weather saying on the air one night on TV, and I got a call from the guy after the news is done. Said, John, you gave this cricket thing, and I'll tell you what, it's not working. This cricket's nowhere near what the temperature really is. So we talked it over for a couple of minutes. I was trying to figure it out. Finally, I said, well, where is your cricket? He said, well, it's down my basement. It's been really bothering me. It's so noisy, but I've been counting the chirps for the temperature. I said, well, there's your problem. That cricket's giving you the temperature of your basement.
Yeah.
You want the outdoor temperature, you have to use an outdoor cricket.
There was something I had found about coffee. Stir strongly brewed coffee. Now, this isn't the instant stuff. This is the brewed coffee in a mug with vertical side-to-side strokes and make bubbles. If the bubbles scatter and then gather in the center, you can expect fair weather. If they go to the sides, rain is possible.
That's right. The bubbles, this is while you're pouring the cup of coffee. The bubbles form around the rim. It's going to rain. If they're in the center, it means fair weather. And then my joke was always if their bubbles are kind of scattered all about the top, it means you're drinking cheap coffee. But no, it just means you can't get a forecast. But yeah, and that has to do with the pressure of the air. So glad you mentioned that because that's a very famous one. And when people hear that for the first time, they're fascinated by it. So in fact, one night I was speaking at some huge dinner. There must have been 500 people there. And so I said, let's do this coffee experiment. So about 50 people had their coffee poured there, and it was interesting because like 45 of the 50, the bubbles formed around the rim, and sure enough, there was like a 70% chance of rain in the forecast, and it rained later that night. So, but everyone was fascinated by that. That does work, though.
I was reading in my vast research for this, John, that weather is always based on two things: low pressure brings rain, and that major weather systems move from west to the east. Is that something that is a constant in weather predicting for this part of the world?
Well, that's the rule of thumb. I mean, every now and then you can have a system coming from the backwards area. Let me tell you, and this is not a folklore thing. This is an actual storm. Let me tell you this story. This is back in '98. Snow is kind of building in from the east. It's going from east to west, which is very puzzling. So I said areas east of here, like Frankfort and Bardstown, so you all could get like 4 inches. Lexington, I said Louisville, I'm thinking, an inch or so, and then nothing west of Louisville. The next day, we were up to 12 inches. So I got into work that afternoon, and they were winding down snow coverage because, they said, no, it's not going to snow anymore. Well, I've been watching this, and there was another batch of snow developed in Cincinnati where it was snowing 1 to 2 inches an hour. And I said, we're going to end up with 20 inches or more by the time this is done. We're going to get another 8 inches. They said, what? You're kidding. I said, no. Well, Louisville ended up with 22.8. It was our biggest snowstorm ever. And portions of Oldham County had over 27 inches of snow from this system. So you went from an original forecast where Louisville was like right on the edge of the snow. This storm went and it produced snow all the way out to Topeka, Kansas. So it went hundreds and hundreds of miles from east to west, and I've never seen one before, and I've never seen one since. It was one for the record books there.
Is there areas on this planet where the weather systems actually do move, say, north to south, south to north, or from the east to the west?
Well, again, most of the time it's going to be in the east to the west or southwest to the northeast. I mean, west to east, southwest to northeast. But you can get every now and then what's called a blocking pattern where a low pressure may go from south directly to north.
Well, here's why.
When you get that in the wintertime, that's when you can get your big snowstorms.
Well, here's why I ask, because we see tropical storms developing down around Africa, and yet they come all the way up to the United States. Is that a natural movement? That's
yeah. Again, in the lower latitudes, much more so, where it goes from the east to the west, and in fact, in the lower latitudes, that's how the flow is. But we're in the mid latitudes here, so we're 38 degree latitude. So you get in the mid latitudes, and it's usually west to east. Where you get in the lower latitudes, and in the tropics, it's more of a east to west.
We're about out of time, but here's a major way that we always want to foretell the weather, and it deals with nature, and it's called Groundhog Day. How much validity do you put in that?
I don't put any in it because, in fact, I went up there. I guess it was 2 or 3 years ago. I went up there, and I love Groundhog Day because people have fun and enjoy it. But I was there, and when they made their announcement, you could see clear skies covering half the sky. Or no, it was completely overcast. That's what it was. It was completely overcast, and they talked about he sees his shadow 6 more weeks of winter. So is it the shadow when he comes out of his hole? It's supposed to be. So he's actually wrong more often than he's right, but I don't want to say anything bad about Phil or the yard groundhogs because people get such enjoyment out of it. And that was a great experience going up there. There was like 20,000 people there having a super time, and I said, just doesn't get any better than this. This is awesome.
That's the weather mecca.
That is. We always say it's one of the most important weather days of the year is Groundhog Day, but when you get right down to it, no, he's accurate like 37% of the time. So hey, you take that for what it's worth. And next time he says it's 6 more weeks of winter, you say, well, odds are we're not going to have that. So who knows? But let me leave this with you here, and don't ever forget this. When a cow tries to scratch its ear, it means a shower is near. When it thumps its ribs with its tail, look out for thunder, lightning, and hail.
You've got it down to a science, John, and I certainly appreciate you being with us on Kentucky Afield and filling us with this wisdom, because I had no idea that you could tell weather so quickly and so accurately just by looking at nature.
Yeah. Feel free to tune in to the weather radio or to tune in to the TV to get your forecast, but don't ignore those weather signs either.
A question I always ask guests, and generally the answer is no. Do you text and drive?
Do I text and drive? Never.
That's a good man. Well, John, thanks a million for being on the show.
Charlie, it was a pleasure. Always fun talking about these things.
John Belski, one of the state's legendary weathermen, spent many years with Wave TV3. Now you can watch him on Channel 32. That's in Louisville at WLKY. Also author of the book Backyard Weather Folklore. You may still find here and there. My name is Charlie Beglin. Join us in a week and we will go inside outdoors again here on Kentucky Afield Radio.